Hello, APGov. Happy week 3. Apologies for not getting all of this to you until today, being Tuesday the 31st. What I want to do and what I'm trying to hold myself to every week is getting everything out to you guys on Monday, so you have the whole Tuesday through Sunday to work through the whole week of class. So I do apologize for the delay. To help with not getting this to you yesterday, I did take 2 different activities off the list of things to do. This was going to be a pretty hefty week, and it still is going to be a decent amount of stuff for you all to kind of work through. But there's a few things we're going to shift around and move to either next week or drop into a different portion of the class as we move forward. So with that, I want to just reflect a little bit on where we've been and then where we're going this week. The point of this video ultimately is going to talk through some aspects about political ideologies. There's 2 other videos I'm going to be putting together here in this next stretch of time. But where we find ourselves right now is we're going to keep kind of one foot in civil rights and liberties and allow that to be something we kind of thread into this week and next week, while also touching into the next unit, which is political beliefs and behaviors. Keep in mind with what's going to be happening with the AP exam, the political beliefs and behaviors unit is not going to be something that's going to be covered in your AP exam. So with that, we're not going to just not do the unit because there's still some really important things for you to know and understand as people, as American citizens, as people who are going to be soon to be voters. There's some things in this unit and then our last unit that are still essential for you to know and us to be able to work through together that I'm going to cover with you and have you kind of work through. But there's a few things we'll be able to condense or kind of carve out as we work through those units together. So with that then, we'll keep kind of threading back to civil rights and liberties, since that is the 3rd out of the 3 units that'll be covered on your AP exam. So with that, we have 2 more Supreme Court case studies for you to cover this week. One, we've got Baker v. Carr, and we've got New York Times versus United States. The Baker v. Carr one might be a bit confusing, so again, use resources as much as possible to help understand. But I will be I did this for your first week. I'll be going back to do it for your second week's worth of work. When I'm grading all your assignments on turnitin.com, I'm typing comments to be able to either let you know if you nailed it, like if you got exactly what you're supposed to out of the case, or if you went a direction, but there's some refining that I could help with in your understanding. I've typed those things in. So please do check, because all of the cases we've studied so far are things that are in those units that are going to be covered on your AP exam. So check my comments so you can kind of really bolster what you know about these cases. But in the Baker v. Carr, like we said, it's a bit of an interesting one. It's going to focus and emphasize on districting, redistricting, the drawing of those district lines. Keep in mind that the conversation about districting, what it's going to most directly impact is voting, people's either ability or access to vote, as well as then their ability or access to representation that is most authentic to their views themselves. So if you start reading that case and you wonder, why are we needing to know this case if it's just about district lines? Keep in mind that district lines matter because, again, that they impact people's right to vote. They impact people's ability to be represented. And those are what we would factor in the civil rights and liberties, voting and representation. The second case you're going to study this week, the New York Times versus United States. That one's an interesting one and a fascinating one. And some of you do come into this class with a little backstory on it. I think in years past, and maybe this year as well, it's something that's shown up in the journalism class that we offer at Valley, which is great for us because you get a little bit of double coverage. But New York Times Co. versus United States will be a good case to be able to look into as far as how the Supreme Court works in carving out exactly what is allowed with free speech, as well as how free the freedom of the press actually is. And that'll be a good one to cover. In each of these cases so far that we've covered, hopefully you've seen that there's a lot of, when the Supreme Court's making decisions, whether it's in the how to kind of balance religion and government with church and state in the Wisconsin v. Yoder and the Engel v. Vitale cases, or it's trying to balance like individual privacy against government awareness in Roe v. Wade, or the idea of is a state government able to actually do any level of segregation of any kind, as was explored in Brown v. Board of Education. Keep in mind, in all of these cases, there's a bit of a seesaw that happens back and forth between individual protection of individual rights, but allowing government to be government. Now, again, something we're going to talk about in this video here, when we talk about political ideologies, there is of course, the conservative political ideology, which pushes for less and less government involvement, less government regulation of any kind. So I don't mean to say allowing government to be government in a sense of that we're all on the same page of like government should be a strong authority. But we do know, if we tie all the way back to Articles of Confederation, that the states of America weren't going to work without some level of a central government to kind of bind them all together. So in our Supreme Court cases, and this is the point I'm trying to make in my roundabout way that hopefully has touched in a couple of our units, the Supreme Court often is doing a seesaw back and forth between how to make sure that individuals' rights are protected and kept safe from government interference and infringement, but how to also then ensure that government has supremacy, as the Constitution calls for in the Supremacy Clause, that the federal government has supremacy and has the ability to maintain order in the society in some level. So we've got seesaw back and forth, and I think the New York Times Co. versus United States is a really good example of that seesaw of the Supreme Court having to kind of determine what think of it sometimes as like Supreme Court's deciding what matters more, that the federal government's the federal government or that individuals and organizations have rights. And that was something I kind of refined for your Wisconsin v. Yoder type-ups. I said to a few of you, I just said, keep in mind that why this is so important is because it's the Supreme Court saying that an individual freedom of expression of religion, the freedom to be able to actually practice your religion, they said that that has priority over state mandated education. So there's seesaw and there's priorities happening in these Supreme Court decisions. So think through when you go for Baker v. Carr, and then especially New York Times versus United States, think about like, what is the Supreme Court prioritizing or seeing as more authoritative, more important over something else? That's a good way to kind of go about some of these. With that, I want to just briefly talk about political, ooh, swallowed in the wrong part of my throat. As you go through political ideologies together with me, I do have notes that I've uploaded to the digital resources section in this lesson. So please head to that. I've got in one document, I've got the notes for this video as well as the next two videos I'm going to make. So just go through all of those and get all the notes down, watch the video so you have my voice kind of talking through and explaining if anything's unclear. And I also have in the digital resources an infographic that's specifically for this, the political ideologies portion. I'm going to let that do a lot of just kind of the helpful informing on this, because it's a really good resource and I don't need to rehash a thing that will be right in front of you in a visual way. But that infographic is great because it's going to unpack this idea of liberal or left and conservative, which is usually we use the wording of right. And it'll unpack the starting philosophy points of each, what then each mindset is going to expect of government, how each mindset can impact the family structure, or how a family or people more one way or the other might then think is important in raising a child, how a child that grows to become an adult with that mindset is going to kind of see themselves in society, as well as then at the very bottom of the infographic, and this is really helpful, there's a list then of like what someone who's more liberal is going to vote for and what someone who's more conservative is going to vote for. This is going to be really, really helpful for you as a resource for this understanding and distinction between liberal and conservative. And so please open up that resource, screenshot it, save it, whatever you need to do, but it's something to kind of continue to reference moving forward. That would be really helpful for you, and should help maybe in your mind understand, why different types of people that think or advocate for the things that they do. So in talking through then the things that I just want to center you on, when we talk about political ideologies, we're not talking political parties. We're talking about, when we say political ideologies, we're talking about the overall beliefs and opinions that shape how someone thinks about public policy and government. It's kind of like the starting point. I guess in one sense, think of it as like the political worldview of a person is their political ideology. And most Americans generally fall in this spectrum between liberal to moderate to conservative. Now, we use the whole left and right wording because there's a spectrum when we say political ideologies. The more left you go, the more involved and regulating government becomes. And the more right you go, the less involved and regulating government is. So if you go to the extreme left, government is fully immersed in regulating and controlling all aspects of society. Well, that's extreme communist socialism, full government running of everything. That there's no level of individual role, responsibility in the society. And if you go all the way to the right, to the full right extreme, then you have anarchy. You have no government regulation involvement whatsoever. So on both ends of the extremes, we have like the full only government regulates everything or no government at all. And just to say this, the general average American citizen and politician is closer to the middle of this spectrum than they are to the extreme ends of the spectrum. I know in the time that we live in which each side of the aisle, now again, talking political parties here, but where it feels like the two sides that we typically think there are so far apart, keep in mind that in general, there still is plenty of overlap in ideas and goals. It's more of just the whole how to accomplish those goals, where our American liberal politicians and people and our American conservative politicians and people differ, that whole how to accomplish those common goals. So with that, the things that are most going to impact the average American's political ideology, whether you might trend towards being more liberal or trend towards being more conservative, would be your views on social realities, social order, your views on the economy and what the economic system of the nation should be or how it should be run. Your views on government involvement, whether you see government as a starting point in society just to get things running and then letting everyone else do their thing, or you see government as needing to kind of offer safety nets in case people fall through the cracks. And when we say the social and economic, social views meaning, do you think government's there to be able to kind of establish the rules that we all live by and just create order? Or do you think in the social realm, government's there to be able to also influence how we treat one another, maintain levels of like equality in society too? And in each of these, again, you might not be fully liberal or fully conservative. There's views within each that you might dabble in, and that's like normal. That's the average person is going to have some areas in which they'd say, I tend to be more liberal in this area, but conservative in this area. Keep in mind when we say liberal and conservative, we're just meaning how involved or non-involved you expect government to be. So in general then, if I could kind of leave it on like a one sentence or one word thing for each ideology, the liberal political ideology generally, like we said once, more government involvement to then be able to work actively towards equality. The idea of everyone having equality of opportunity, kind of like the idea that everyone should be able to have the same starting point. This is why a liberal ideology is going to push for views like government-provided education all the way through potentially college. This is why a liberal ideology is going to push for social programs that provide for people during times of unemployment, ensuring that everyone has an equality of opportunity, a same starting point. The conservative political ideology is going to generally want less government involvement to then allow for equity. So we have a difference between equality and equity. Equity basically just means fairness. Think of equity as this will sound harsh, but I don't mean it to. Think of equity as just the idea that you get what you deserve. Equity means if you work hard, then society should be structured in a way where then you earn well. If you work hard, if you have general positively helpful characteristics, then things kind of should generally go well for you, and you should be fairly rewarded for it. Whereas if you aren't working hard, or if you aren't pursuing things in a positive or helpful manner, if you're, again, to use harsh terms, if you're lazy or just neglecting aspects of your life, then also you get what you deserve too. That there's not necessarily a safety net for you if you're working opposite towards a direction that you should. And that's then what a conservative ideology is going to push for. Basically just that you are rewarded fairly for the level of work that you put in. Difference between equality and equity. Keep in mind, again, we're not saying that the other ideology doesn't also push for those things, whereas a conservative ideology is going to, at the end of the day, push for equity in my own individual life. So that infographic should be really helpful. Please make sure you spend some time with that. And hopefully this was helpful as well in talking through political ideologies that are most common in general in American government. Blessings to you guys on the week, and I'm going to head on to video number 2, which is on political socialization.